Hello and welcome to Panic in the Warp Core. My name is Chris.
And I'm Chip.
We are embarking on our premiere voyage of a full chronological rewatch and reaction of all of Star Trek.
Movies and TV.
Movies and TV. And tonight we're kicking it off with Broken Bow, the pilot episode of Star Trek Enterprise. Welcome back. Like we said, this is the first episode of Panic in the Warp Core. We are tackling Broken Bow, and for time, we've decided to break this out into two parts.
Yep, so we're going to watch roughly the first half. I think that the entire runtime is 87 minutes, so we're going to watch roughly half of it and find a good breaking point, and then we'll continue the discussion on the second half in the next episode.
Absolutely. So, Enterprise is coming up on its, what did we say, 24th anniversary?
In September, it'll be 24 years since this premiered.
And I remember I was in college when it came out.
I was married and had 2 kids, but...
And it came out shortly before 9/11.
Shortly after.
It was, so
the premiere date was September 26th, 2001, so roughly 2 weeks after...
But
9/11.
Everything was filmed prior.
Yes, everything was filmed prior, and one of the little bits of trivia I found was that the Suliban were actually, I think it was it Ronald Moore? Somebody, or maybe one of the producers, they actually took the name Suliban as a variation on Taliban.
Yeah.
But it was before, they'd written it all before 9/11 even happened. And so, but a lot of shows pushed back their premiere, so I know 24 was coming out at the same time. And because there was a hijacking and I think I don't remember if they blew up the plane or crashed the plane in the premiere of 24, that they pushed that back to, I want to say January. They pushed it back a couple of months, but Enterprise didn't move their date at all. They kept it where it was at. And I think from, just the way Star Trek is, it's a positive look at things. It's, gives hope. So I think it was probably, well received for the time.
And I've always liked Enterprise. Mostly, I started really enjoying the visual aesthetic. The Enterprise, the NX-01, very reminiscent of like a naval submarine or something like that. And so, from a artistic/design perspective, that always kind of drew me in.
Yeah, and I like that this is all pre-Federation. So, there is, Starfleet was just a new concept at this time, but there was no Federation. We basically, the humans had a relationship with the Vulcans, but not much else. So in the premiere episode, we see a Klingon right away, so we've got some familiarity there. Then we get the Suliban introduced and have a new race that we've never seen before. So there's a lot that they kind of threw in, so that it kind of pulled in, old school fans with some of those races, and then develop some new fans too.
Should we jump in?
I think we can.
All right, let's jump in. If I can find the right button. So, I really like how they kind of opened with something relatable.
Yeah.
Something that wasn't specific to Trek, something that a general audience would really be able to grab a hold of, right? And they use it to kind of set the stage.
Well, it sets the stage, and it shows how important Archer's father was in his childhood.
Yep.
So I think that these scenes were in 2021, and then the bulk of the episode is in 21, and then the bulk is in 2151.
Yeah.
So it's like a 30-year.
And I tell you what,
spacing.
I was never that steady with a paintbrush.
No.
When I was painting models. Mine looked like garbage.
No.
And then we go to Oklahoma 30 years later, which looks an awful lot like Iowa.
Yeah. It's pretty green, a lot of corn.
And I've never had a Klingon running through cornfields in
No.
Iowa that I'm familiar with.
So the one little bit here, the actor who played Clang is Tom Lister Jr., and they said he was the second WWE wrestling superstar to appear on Star Trek, with Dwayne Johnson being the first.
From Voyager,
and then the Big Show was on after,
That's right.
after this. So,
and I like that they didn't try to emulate the original series makeup and style of the Klingons. They went with what had been working,
kind of like
Next
a traditional look in Next Gen.
Yeah, and
the Worf look
and Mr. Farmer guy about to kick off an interstellar incident, and he just had absolutely no idea.
No, I like kind of the phaser shotgun thing that he had.
Yeah.
So this was their first look at the Suliban.
Yeah, and
the effects are a little dated.
They are.
But at the time they were good, and it was a much more cinematic feel to the episode than the original series and Next Gen and DS9. So again, it was original series, Next Gen, DS9, and Voyager all came before this one, right?
Correct. Yes.
Were any of them still running at the time? I don't think so. I think there was a gap after Voyager before this one.
I don't think there was anything on.
Yeah.
My 90s time flow was a little fuzzy because most of the Trek I caught in syndication instead of when it actually aired. So
yeah, I caught most of Next Gen as it aired, but obviously the original series was off the air before I was born. So it's even older than me.
That thing packs a punch.
Yeah.
And this guy's like, what the hell did I just do?
Yeah, he's like, what is that guy? And then we go to Faith of the Heart.
Okay.
So there's a bit of trivia on this one too, isn't there?
I
thought you told me about it was originally a Rod Stewart song for Patch Adams, and then they re-recorded it because they couldn't afford Rod Stewart or something like that.
So it was originally recorded by Rod Stewart for Patch Adams. My hunch/suspicion always has been that they bought the rights to the song, but they didn't want to pay for Rod Stewart. So they were like, go find somebody that sounds like him.
Which they did.
And, good job, Russell.
Yeah.
Is it Russell Watson, right?
Yeah, it's Russell Watson. So the song was composed by Diane Warren for the film Patch Adams. So Rod Stewart didn't actually write it. He just sang it for that. Yeah. So that's why they could get around not paying him to re-record it. They can have somebody else record it.
I like the song. I think at the time I didn't. It was jarring.
It was very different, and it was the only. I think it's still the only Trek theme that has lyrics, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, the visuals during it are kind of fun because it kind of takes you through the whole exploration and mankind's desire to explore and find new things and all that. But I don't know. I don't hate it. It is nice that you can skip it on most of these, streaming services.
In this house, we never skip Faith of the Heart.
Oh yeah.
Much to my wife's chagrin. This scene to me kind of evokes that Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah, when Scotty and Kirk are going up to the new refitted Enterprise.
And look, I know a lot of people drag on the motion picture because that whole scene was like 12 minutes long.
There's a lot of long scenes, but much like Star Wars, the ships are characters in themselves. So you're introducing the Enterprise as a character in the movie, and we'll get to that movie at some point.
Oh yeah,
down the road here.
And so we get our first look at Adult Archer and Trip Tucker. I have that NX-01 hat. I love that hat.
Should have worn it.
I should have. Yeah. Maybe next time.
All right.
But I also enjoy how even though they tried to emulate kind of what Motion Picture did with this scene.
Yeah.
Coming up here in a minute, Trip actually bounces the pod off the hull.
Right here. Yeah.
So introducing like some humor and some levity, and that's not a bad thing.
I think it's still, that they're brand new at this. They've not gone into any sort of interstellar exploration, so this is all kind of brand new to them.
Yep.
And I like Scott Bakula.
Heck yeah, who doesn't like Bakula?
I know. He was just a great choice for this role.
Yeah.
He had enough name recognition that people would gravitate towards it, and you might pull in some Quantum Leap fans or some, of his fans otherwise, but, I think he was just a good choice for it.
I do have to say I am not a fan of, like, the collared Admiralty uniforms here with the ties. I mean, I understand what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to bridge that gap between traditional naval dress uniform that you'd see today to, hey, what might this look like in the 2150s? I don't love it. It looks weird. But I do love the jumpsuits.
I do, yeah. But they seem very utilitarian when they're on the ship.
And it also, like I said before, it evokes that naval feel, like, you know.
Yep. Except T'Pol doesn't wear the jumpsuit, so...
She should have.
She wears more like a cat suit, like 7 and 9, but...
She should have. That's a Rick Berman thing.
I know.
Fucking
and
Berman.
it just, we'll get to that when we get to some of the decontamination scenes, but...
Yeah.
I read too that Jolene Blalock had her with a different hairdo for like the first 3 days of shooting, and then they changed it, so they had to go back and reshoot everything with this hairstyle, which I think this hairstyle works great for a Vulcan woman.
Yeah. Now they would just CGI it.
True.
Yeah, but the whole collar over the uniform lines on that, it bugs me.
Yeah.
I nitpick uniforms.
Well, you like your uniforms.
I do. Okay.
You like a good man
Saval, in uniform? The actor that plays Saval, looks super familiar to me, and I don't know where I know him from. But
from Saval,
he does a great job of, kind of playing that arrogant, almost holier-than-thou persona, right?
Yeah.
And we get into some things here, and at least through the first season, this really drives me nuts. How they push this narrative that, the Vulcans are holding us back.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all the Vulcans' fault. If you hadn't stepped in, Archer's daddy would have got to see his engine built. Like, that's. Yeah.
And I know what they're setting the stage for, but it's also
right.
good that when they actually get out into space here, and T'Pol points out, the kind of folly of their thinking, and I think it's when Trip sees I forget what race it is, that the kid's learning how to breathe basically on his own, and that he thinks it's child abuse, and T'Pol says no, they're basically just rearing the child so he can survive in this environment.
Well, and they, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but they really kind of pinpointed a hallmark of human behavior, which is where we judge everything through the lens in which we were brought up in.
Right.
And like other cultures and other ways of thinking are generally not accepted.
Yeah.
That obviously that's a generalization, but yeah. But it's interesting to go back and watch this and like have T'Pol in the background and kind of just have like this minor role, and then for her to become like to be that series regular and to become like the fan favorite that she was is kind of a cool intro. I like it.
And her character arc is good too, because she's so icy and just very very structured, just like you'd expect a Vulcan to be. But the more she spends time around Trip and Archer and the crew, she becomes a part of the crew. And originally she was just supposed to be kind of like an emissary, or like almost like a
babysitter.
Yeah, I was gonna say a chaperone, but same thing.
Yeah.
Until they deliver Clang back to Kronos. But
yeah, and you see hints of that even in this opening episode where, well,
she starts to gain some respect for Archer and how much he cares for the crew and wants to do the right things. But but they also show Archer's naivete when they're out in space, and he's
100%. And I do like how they introduce Phlox as well.
I love Phlox.
I mean, it's such a cool character.
I love his love of food too.
Yeah, and
they just kind of weave it in and out of all the different.
And just the way like the actor portrays him, I think, is so well done. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been in a few other things. I can't remember offhand what he's been in, but he's been good in about everything I've seen him in.
We've been rewatching Criminal Minds, and he's one of the unsubs in like one episode of Criminal Minds. I was like, hey, it's Dr. Phlox. What are you doing to those kids? Another thing that I think is really cool is how they introduce the transporter as like something that's for transporting cargo and supplies, but not necessarily organic matter, much less humans.
Yeah. I was trying to look up the actor on that Vulcan character, but
You know, when you think about the transporter, I really can't blame Dr. McCoy for not liking it.
well, there was that transporter incident in the motion picture where they
Yeah.
fused two people together inside out. We didn't actually see them. We just heard the noise, and it was enough to be a little disturbing. But I like that too. And when we get on the ship too, they don't have tractor beams. They've got grappling hooks. They've got.
Yep.
I don't remember what kind of armaments they have. Is it? They wouldn't have phasers yet, would they? Or did they have them on the ship?
I don't think
I don't
so.
remember.
No.
I think they have photon or torpedoes and. But I don't remember a lot of. There's not a lot of ship
they don't
battles
have. They don't have shields. They've got hull plating
It's
that they
armored,
polarize, right? So you're obviously seeing things 100 years or so before the Star Trek that people are used to seeing.
Yeah.
So how they're stepping into the technology, I think, is pretty well done. Yep, that's right. Clean that engine there, Trip.
Yeah. And I think I know you haven't watched The Expanse, but there's a lot of visual elements from the NX-01 here that really you see a lot of very utilitarian or industrialized ships in The Expanse because they're working ships.
The first 2 seasons, I think.
Did you? Okay.
So yeah,
that's a really good show too. But yeah, I feel like there's a little influence from what they did here to kind of that because that's like the very near future too. And
and
The Expanse.
I'm always impressed with like the matte paintings on the planets and things like that, and just like the amount of just sheer talent it takes to produce something.
Well,
like
I love practical effects like that too.
Right.
You just don't see it anymore.
It's so easy to just
CGI
it, and there's something to be said about the way things used to be done. So. Oh, look at him. He's got his little button-down white shirt on. Got to impress Linda Park.
Yeah.
It's like total dad outfit right there.
It's like dad on the beach on vacation.
Yeah. It's.
Does he have sandals on? I didn't see.
I don't know. That's a
he
good question.
He should if he doesn't.
Yeah.
With the environment that they're in.
That's true. I feel like, like you've got like the reluctant crew that you drag along on something like that.
Yeah, it's like
right?
he targeted Hoshi he wanted her as part of the crew, and she was kind of hesitant, wanted to finish. I can't remember if she was trying to finish it, teaching or some sort of semester here or something. But ultimately she ends up going. But then she has second thoughts and realizes the value she can bring towards the end of it when she starts to learn the Klingon language. And it's a good intro because they show instead of tell how like the linguistic puzzles are something that just really click with her and appeal to her. So that's I think the show to a certain extent suffers from too much exposition in certain things, but in other things like this, it's like, okay, well, they're showing why she decided to come instead of having some long drawn out dialogue explaining it to us, which that to me is a better form of storytelling than just info dumping. Yeah, I don't like it when it's just all info dumping. That two people having a conversation to explain everything that we need to know.
Right.
I always prefer the show don't tell.
And now we're on the ship again. Love the interior, love the aesthetic. Everything. It's kind of like that space
Porthos.
Gray. It just cracks me up
that
he gets to bring his dog.
Well, I love Porthos too, but was it Star Trek, the reboot when who plays Scotty in the reboot? I can't remember now. I should know. But anyway, when he talks about that they were talking about transwarp beaming, and he lost Admiral
Simon
Archer's
Pegg.
dog. Yeah, Simon Pegg. So I assume Admiral Archer's dog might have been another. It might not be this Porthos, but it's another beagle. But
true.
But so I like those little callbacks between shows and movies and the different generations of the show. So.
Right. I was reading something about these uniforms. So previously, the uniform designers were under specific instructions not to have anything like a visible zipper.
Oh.
And so when he came to Enterprise and designed the uniforms, or maybe it was a she, I don't remember, they were like, you can use zippers. And so he just put fucking zippers everywhere. Oop. So I find that amusing.
Yeah.
I recently purchased a jumpsuit like that, and not all.
Purchased 2 of them, didn't you?
I did. That's a story for another time.
Yeah.
Not all of the zippers are functional, which made me a little sad. But
Really?
yeah,
I thought it'd be like,
I wanted.
Tom's Coat and Wheel of Time with all your pockets and places to put things.
Yeah,
And...
I wanted them to all to work, but
Yeah.
they're just decorative. But I guess for $80, what can you expect?
Yeah.
So. Oh, see, and here's the little ceremony where we get to see Zephyr.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So this is the callback. So
Yeah.
I saw after the original series, so Next Generation, DS9. So they each had like somebody from a prior series made a cameo in the episode. But this one, since it takes place before all of that, they used Zephyr Cochrane as kind of the cameo or the anchor
sense.
to the past. So
Yeah. They look so thrilled, don't they?
yeah. And it's funny to see Zephyr Cochrane here because he's a lot more hopeful and optimistic than he was in First Contact. 'Cause he was just kind of a drunk, just didn't realize the importance of his discovery.
Yeah.
At the time.
Well, and I think the Vulcans were given that look because he's up there giving a very pro-human let's go speech, and they're just like, really, you guys are making a mistake.
Yeah.
Which I don't entirely disagree with.
No.
But I mean, hey, it is what it is.
But I don't know. Just even being in the corporate world at times, you have people that get up there and they talk about things, and you're just like, oh my god. And I probably look like the Vulcans, just like, just get me out of here. I don't want to hear this.
See, and this is the first shot of the bridge.
Yep.
And I gotta say, once again, I love the design of the bridge. The captain's chair, initially, I was like, it's not quite, it doesn't have that
the gravitas.
Je ne sais quoi. But over time, it has kind of grown on me.
Yeah.
It kind of looked like they just slapped fancy arms on a computer chair.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so then we have another good callback here to Archer's childhood and wishing his dad could be part of this now.
Yeah. Yep. Ah, the fond memories.
Yeah. At least they didn't use like all the soft lighting they did in the original series with all the William Shatner shots. Of, when he's pondering something.
Yep.
So they're releasing the moorings and on their way.
I always like the shot of the astronauts on the outside. It's like, how cool would that job be?
Yeah.
Like,
I remember that. And we've talked about the motion picture a few times, that there's some of those early scenes where you see it's basically people working. It's a job, working in space. And so it's kind of cool.
And
so I remember, what was is it warp 4.5 is what they can get up to in this ship? I thought I read that somewhere.
I think they called it the Warp 5 engine, but they were gonna they were shooting for Warp 4.5.
Yeah, so it says so I think it's right in here. Trips in Archer's conversation describes Warp 4.5 as Neptune and back in 6 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it says this would make Warp 4.5 roughly 82 times the speed of light.
All right.
So anyway.
See here, one thing Enterprise does that I enjoy, kind of like Deep Space Nine does, is it really has an overarching narrative.
Yeah, and DS9 was really the first of the series to have that kind of serialized storytelling. But this one I forgot until we did the rewatch recently, that they introduced the temporal time war right out of the gate.
They did.
I kind of forgot that they did that.
Well, and they just name dropped it. It's like, temporal Cold War. It's like
Temporal Cold War, that was it.
And again, they didn't info dump or do a lot of exposition.
No, but they planted the seeds.
They planted the seeds. And so, in my opinion, that's solid storytelling. That looks fun.
Yeah. I always like all of Dr. Phlox's experiments and things that he's studying. And
well, really, when you
he's really
think
their
about
science officer in a way.
Yeah, like he's practicing a lot of alternative medicine.
Yeah.
And, under the guise of, hey, I'm an alien species studying humans. Here are some things that I've used and found during the course of my studies and travels that I have to take with me in order to be effective at my job.
It's been a while since I've watched Next Generation or Voyager. I haven't actually watched all of Voyager, which I shouldn't say that out loud, but I haven't. But DS9. So was the Donoblian race introduced in one of those series?
I don't actually remember.
I didn't know if this is the first time we've seen one, or if
thought it was, but it might have been.
I didn't know. I couldn't remember. But so if anybody's watching this and knows, let us know.
Yeah. Comments. It's fascinating to me how like when Aaron Archer was like going down and like inspecting the Klingon, it almost felt like he was gonna just like poke the ridges or something.
Yeah.
just his body language to me was funny.
Yeah. I'm always impressed with the makeup in some of these too, especially the older ones. I know this was before CGI, but how much the actor can emote the Denoblian smile.
I don't care for that.
But how much the actor's emotions kind of come through the makeup, it isn't just a mask. It's,
right.
It gives that feeling that it's a real being,
And a lot of people dump on the Discovery Klingons from like the first season.
That's when they shave their heads and stuff.
Yeah, like I didn't mind it. And like the way the Klingon language sounded more guttural, that actually was something that I thought was pretty cool.
And I don't remember. Did they tried to kind of explain it though, as the Klingons were at war, and when they're at war, they do something different or something like that. Yeah. This is one we don't see a lot of zero-G scenes in Star Trek.
No, that
every now and then, but
had to be kind of a fun scene to shoot, though.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting concept that every artificial grav ship has this space where the gravity's just a little wonky. And it also feeds into Mayweather's backstory of him growing up on a ship or a freighter or something like that, and just being intimately familiar with how some of these systems work. Yeah. So, and I think in season 2 we get to learn a little bit more because he does like go visit his parents on their ship or something like that. But
this one does a good job too of introducing the whole crew.
Right.
You don't get to see a lot of everybody. You see a lot of Trip. You see a lot of Archer, a lot of T'Pol, but the other ones are introduced, but they all kind of have different arcs as the series goes forward. And Star Trek, all the Star Trek shows have done that well. So.
Yeah. I would argue that maybe Discovery didn't do enough of that soon enough with like some of the bridge crew.
I have some issues when we get to Discovery, which isn't that far away.
It's not.
There's things I liked about it, but there's things. Yeah, we can talk about Discovery when we get there.
Yeah.
And then we get into the Vulcan eating habits and.
Yep, and the fact that the captain has his own personal mess.
Yeah.
Was kind of interesting. Recently watched The Hunt for October again.
But they did in that. And
they did, yes.
But I didn't know if this was like a traditional Navy thing.
Yeah, so I wonder if this is actually rooted in naval tradition.
Yeah, I'd imagine it might be.
So, but yeah. But like, hey, candlelight dinner, invite the Vulcan.
Yeah.
Have some breadsticks.
Isn't the Vulcans don't like to actually touch their food? Didn't that come up here?
Which seems an odd thing. I don't know. I know that they're and look at this. Like her salad is like super tiny, and then these guys both get these giant steaks. It's like I've eaten salad before. You need like 4 times as much to fill yourselves.
Yeah, but to fit into that cat suit, though, I suppose you can't eat a big steak like that.
Yeah. But like, legitimately, I feel terrible for the women that had to deal with Rick Berman.
I know. But even on the original series, they had some pretty skimpy dresses and outfits, or their uniform dress, and then some of the aliens or people they encountered out in space had some pretty racy outfits for the time.
Well,
but it was the 60s.
Yeah, so. Well, I read the uniform mini skirts were actually like Nichelle Nichols and Grace Lee Whitney's idea.
Oh, really?
They wanted those because it was like, women's liberation,
Empowering,
and it was empowering for them to be able
yeah.
to do those things. So,
When you think about, I mean, just how normal it is to see, these diverse
Yeah.
casts now, but back then that was
right.
groundbreaking.
Also interesting on this bridge design, we have one spot for like piloting and navigation instead of the traditional helmsman navigator station that you see later in later series.
Yeah.
So
do you know? I mean, I don't know the numbers, but do you know what the crew complement was on this ship?
I should 112.
Say, because it's a lot smaller than
It is,
the
yes.
other ones, but it's much more of an exploration craft. Not. Because I thought in Next Generation, people live there. It's just they've got kids, they've got families, they've got
NX-01 crew complement. Let's see what we say here. 83 individuals. So, compared to the Constitution class in the original series, which I think was like 438 or something like that, significantly smaller.
Yeah.
But if you look at the ship design, right, there's no secondary hull. Everything's just comprised in the saucer section.
Yeah.
Even the navigational deflector dish, instead of being underneath, is like right at the front of the hull. Yeah. So, and like you do get to see like their ideas for like the refit where they add the secondary hull if the series had continued.
Yeah.
And that to me kind of like shows how they bridge the gap between the NX-01 and what we see with the NCC 1701, right?
Yeah, because that's the next generation of ship we see, isn't it? Or is it the Discovery?
Discovery, probably like the
Probably kind of
Crossfield
bridge
class,
yeah.
and then whatever like ship that Prime Universe Giorgio captained.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got those. This is interesting because like just like the way they write Hoshi, like she can just like listen to something and then she can start to pick things up, and I was like, I don't know if that's how language works, but I also don't know much about language, so maybe it does.
Took a couple years of Spanish in high school, and
same.
I remember the curse words and
right.
a few things, but
yeah.
But I don't know if it's one too that where they say, if you learn a Latin-based language, that you can, if you learn Spanish, you can pick up French pretty easily because there's a lot of similarities where English is just kind of a bastardized language.
I like the lights out camera effect with the Suliban going down the corridor. I thought that was a good choice. And this does a really good job of showing like they just can't contort their bodies. Like they've also got like almost this chameleon effect, which is really cool. And it also sets up the crew of the Enterprise into what, an altercation with what seems to be a vastly superior foe.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a first contact situation.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's no prime directive yet.
Were the Vulcans aware of the Suliban? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
But I feel like, this is the part where like you get some of that like human Vulcan friction here coming up when they get away with when they get away with Clang.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, you're gonna have a bad day. And like they just like made off with a Klingon, not making any noise.
Yeah.
Nobody noticed.
Right.
But the lights were off, Chip.
Well, yeah. I mean, we could see.
They gave him a pillow.
Yeah,
that was
nice of
him.
I bet that was Dr. Phlox that gave him the pillow.
Probably. He seems like he probably has a good bedside manner.
I imagine he does.
Yeah.
So this is where we get into or not quite yet, but when T'Pol's telling them they need to return, and Archer's like, no, we need to keep going.
The mission's over because you don't have the Klingon anymore. Yeah. And and like it kind of boggles my mind how like beholden the human race is to the advice / wishes of the Vulcans.
Yeah.
It's like what's going on here that this dynamic kind of exists. That's something I've always kind of wondered.
And I don't know if they ever delved much into how much the Vulcans influenced kind of the course and technology and development of, it's like they picked up on the warp signature after Zephyr and Cochrane made his flight, but
right.
What other role did the Vulcans play in kind of our development?
Yeah.
And did they have a prime directive at the time? I don't know, because they kind of got involved with our species.
Now we're gonna have some words, fighting words. Like, she does a great job of looking just like smug and arrogant.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a hallmark if you're gonna play a Vulcan. You have to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, you have to have just that air about you that.
And like it's ridiculous to me. Like when she walks out, she's like, "Well, I assume you're gonna like inform your superiors that you lost the Klingon," and he's like, "No, I'm not, and neither are you." So
yeah, but it kind of shows his kind of impulsive and he's driven by emotion. And it really does kind of play that emotion and logic against each other.
Like he's got to prove himself.
Yeah,
and like the human race has to prove themselves.
Yeah,
and
I don't know how tall Jolene Blaylock is, but she looks tiny in this, especially on some of these scenes. But her presence is so strong in a lot of these scenes, and I think it goes to that.
Yeah.
She's got that right look, and she's got that stoic face, and is able to show, a limited emotion.
Yeah. The autopsy scene is kind of interesting. It's like okay, that had to be a fun prop to make.
Yeah. This scene, he almost looks like he could be in the original Dune movie, Dr. Phlox.
Oh,
Like he could be like Peter de Vries or something from Lynch's Dune. But...
I don't like eyeballs, even if they're fake.
They kind of need them though to see.
Well, it's not that I don't like eyeballs. I just don't do well with eye things.
I don't mind eyes. I don't like when they're pulling teeth or doing stuff like that in shows or movies.
Yeah.
It just
I gotta build up the tension between these two.
Yep. Because they got a relationship to develop eventually here.
Exactly. Spoilers if this is your first time.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I think
it's fine. Are we trying to keep it with spoilers?
No,
it's been out for almost 24 years.
Right.
So.
Almost a quarter of a century. Yeah. So I think we're okay.
There's got to be like a statute of limitations on spoilers, right?
I think so.
I would assume so.
Yeah, I don't know. I like this engine room design. Like,
I'd love to see, like, just do a tour of the sets. I know they don't exist anymore, but it would have been fun just to see how they built them. Because sometimes when you see, like, the making of shots and you see, it's just like plywood and stuff behind, it's just... Yeah. They make it look so real, but...
Well, and I feel like, Paramount or CBS or whoever had the rights back then didn't really realize what they were sitting on.
No, probably not.
They just, like, junked the sets after they were done with everything. Trip looks pissed. Look at him.
Oh, intense. Scott Bakula's drawing on his quantum leap experience here to figure out how to go after the Klingon.
It might be. Yeah.
So are those his rank pips on his shoulder, on his right shoulder there?
Yep.
So it's funny how those have changed through the seasons too.
I think Tucker's a commander, so he's got 3. He's obviously the captain. He's got 4. Mayweather has a single pip, I think.
Is he?
So he would be, I'm guessing, an ensign.
That's what I would assume.
So it's very reminiscent of Next Generation. So it's interesting that you go from that to the stripes on the sleeves.
Yeah.
And then it takes another 80 years after that to get back to the concept of pips.
Yeah.
So.
Was Next Generation the first one that had the communicators in the badges?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I just like the primitive, not primitive, but the lower tech elements of this or
Right.
aesthetics.
Yep.
But then they played off against some of these superior races who are much more
Yeah.
technologically advanced.
Well, and this is kind of fun because you get to see some of like it starts to maybe peel back some of the mystery, and it starts to maybe fill in a little bit here and there, but it doesn't tell you too much.
No, because at this point we really don't know what the importance of the Klingon is, do we?
Right. I mean, we're 35 minutes, 40 minutes in.
Yeah. Yeah, we're almost halfway through the two-parter episode,
and we're just now getting a tidbit that there's
that he had a contact that he was trying to meet. And...
Interestingly, Saren was the name of the villain in Mass Effect.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
I like it when they walk out and they have like their flowy cloaks and it just kind of billows behind them.
Yeah.
So they piece together where Klang had been.
Right.
And now they get to wear away team jackets.
Yeah, and they're cool too.
Those are nice. I like the quilted look.
Mm-hmm.
They look comfy.
And functional,
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about like the Cage, the unaired pilot for TOS, like they had outer layers that they put on.
Yeah.
For the away team too. So I feel like hearkening back to that was kind of a cool thing. And I know Strange New Worlds did it as well. But yeah. And it always kills me how they send the entire senior staff on away missions.
Oh, I know. Well, and this would be the very first away mission in Star Trek, in the chronological world of Star Trek.
It's also kind of cool how the shuttle pods just like drop out of the bottom of the ship.
Yeah.
And it's like, even this, like, for 24 years old, that whole landing sequence looks really good.
It looks good still. Yeah, Next Gen looks dated now, especially the warp scenes and some of that. But
yeah.
And I know they went back and did some digital enhancements to the original series, but I like what they did with this. The Suleiman and
Trip
kind of
Tucker doesn't like bugs.
No. Dr. Phlox would have collected it, though.
Probably. And it would have saved somebody's life in 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious to me how, like, out of place they look. It's like, there's there's no even attempt to blend in. They're just like...
No. They're just kind of wandering around, bumbling around.
And they've got T'Pol there to be like, okay...
You guys need to focus
stop
in.
it.
Stop gawking. You're embarrassing me.
And okay,
this... now we're gonna sex it up again,
right? And it's like, okay, so like they dance and eat butterflies while they're dancing,
something like that.
I mean,
yeah, I didn't quite catch what was going on here, other than they wanted to meet the contact. But
yeah, I mean, I think it was an excuse for Berman to include some boobs
and tight blue painted bodysuits and pink or magenta or whatever that is.
Yep.
But
and you gotta like how Malcolm's like, yeah, I'm into this, huh?
Yeah, Malcolm's kind of like, all right,
dude. Like Malcolm and Trip are like total 90s, early 2000s.
Oh yeah, they're
balls.
They're kind of just dudes.
They're like the epitome of the
they're like
bro.
the college dudes.
Yep.
Dude, bro.
And I like how Mayweather's just like, dude, we got shit to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put your dick away and let's go.
Yeah. So this is where we kind of see that encounter when we were talking earlier, where we see here the show shows them seeing things through a very human upbringing versus not understanding other cultures and other species, and putting that human lens on it when he thinks she's being abusive to the kid, but she's helping the kid strengthen his lungs so he can breathe on his own. And T'Pol basically smacks Trip down and says, well, just stay out of it.
So T'Pol made a mistake in that she left Trip unsupervised.
That's true.
That should not have happened.
And she's the chaperone.
She is the chaperone. She is the babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there's only one of her.
That's true.
I like how the communicators are reminiscent of the original series too.
They
Like
flip up.
That's like one of my favorite designs is that flip up communicator.
Which I still think is great that, when the original cell phones started coming out, that they were kind of modeled after the Star Trek communicators.
Yep. And he just can't let that go.
I know. I think we're coming up on our halfway point on the episode here. So.
We are. And it's hilarious to me that they're standing right there having their conversation, jawing, and they don't realize who's basically standing like right next to them.
Yeah.
I
think it's interesting too how many of the species speak English here.
Dun dun dun.
All right.
Okay, look. So that was the first half of Broken Bow. I tell you what. Why don't we each give our thoughts on ranking? What did we think? How was the first half of this?
I mean, from watching it almost 24 years ago, I rewatched the series probably 10 years ago and went through all 4 seasons. And then, obviously, last week, getting ready for our new journey with the chronological rewatch, I watched it again twice last week. So this is my 3rd time going through it. But it does a good job of building the characters right away and making you emotionally engaged in the characters pretty quickly, especially Archer. And, and he's the centerpiece of the show. And,
he is, yes.
But him, and then to Paul, the way that they have that dynamic between them, the emotion versus logic. And, I think that there's a lot of seeds that are planted that we see kind of, bloom later on. But
yeah.
Do we want to talk about our ranking system, Harvey?
Yeah, we decided to implement a system of pips. So 1 through 4 pips to individually rank how we feel about these. So what would you think your rank would be?
On this one, for a premiere episode, I'm going to go with 3 pips out of 4.
Okay.
I think that it was a very solid episode, what we've seen so far, and I think it only gets better as you go into it. But I was looking, I had some of the original reception, or the accolades. So, so the AV Club in 2014 said this was on their top 10 list of episodes that best represent the Star Trek series. In 2016, the Hollywood Reporter rated it as its 80th best episode of any Star Trek of all time. IGN ranked it as
considering there are over 900 episodes of Star Trek. That's
IGN ranked Broken Bow as the 21st best episode of Star Trek. Empire ranked it as the 37th. And then Screen Rant said it's the 4th best episode of the franchise. I don't think it's the 4th best, but it's definitely in that top 50.
So for me, I love how they introduced the crew. I love how they bring them together. I love how they're different and diverse enough, not just like where they're from, culturally and things like that, but also like their personalities, their differences, their interests, things like that. The ship, like I said, the ship design, I love the ship design. I like the intro with the Klingon crash landing in Oklahoma. This camera's annoying me. And I think it works really well. I would go so far as to say it is probably my favorite Star Trek pilot.
I think I would agree with that.
And I'm going to give it 4 pips.
Ooh. You're more generous than I am.
I am. But there's still the second half.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think we'll do the rank system on the second half, and then we'll do like an overall maybe. But
and I think so when I read this one, when it aired originally, it aired as a 2-part. It was a 2-hour slot that they aired it in, so they aired it the complete story.
Sure.
Where we're breaking it in half. But I know that Next Generation Encounter at Farpoint was a 2-part episode, but it was 1 week was part 1 and the next week was part 2. So this is the first one that they did it almost like as a cinematic, feature.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Yep.
but like you said,
Yeah.
I think they knocked it out of the park. And this was really, if you go back, so I'm pretty sure that Voyager was done by now. I don't think there'd been a new Star Trek show for a couple of years. So, they're trying to reboot the franchise here and pull in viewers of the original shows and younger viewers as well. So I think that they did a good balance of, kind of blending that old nostalgia with some new races and new species. And
When did you say this aired? Was it September
2001?
01?
Yeah.
Voyager ended in May of 2001.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't that big of a gap.
Like 5-6 months. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know there was a big gap before Discovery came out, but
yeah.
Anyway.
All right.
So
that is it for our first episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you are still with us, we hope you'll continue to tune in. Join us for part 2, where we go through the second part of this episode, give our thoughts, our commentary, and we'll take it from there. We'll just keep moving through.
All right.
If you like what you saw, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that thumbs up button. Please use the comment section. And we will see you next time.
Sounds good.